about going down the, oops. Talk about going down the rabbit hole. When you start looking into something like this, what you find is that there's a whole lot more out there in the way of citizen science initiatives than I would have ever guessed. So what I'm going to show you is a brief overview. There is so much out there that I could only just touch on a few things of interest to me and to a few of our members. What we're seeing here is an explosion, thanks to technology and the internet, in the type of programs that are available and how easy it is now for the public to be involved in a variety of scientific endeavors. But first, I want to go over some historic antecedents to this, to the citizen scientists. A lot of people think that this is a fairly new thing, like, oh, citizen science, it started in the 70s with the first Bush administration or whatever. And I would say that this goes way back. We have people such as Mary Anning, who along the Lyme Regis coast discovered the first complete fossil of a dinosaur in 1811. We have Anise Newton Foote, who did a lot of research into atmospheric gases and gave us some insights about what the climate was like in the past. Her work ignored until for over 100 years. And then with interest in climate change of late, her name has come up, somebody I had not heard of if I hadn't done a bit of digging. Of course, we have Caroline and William Herschel. He was responsible for the discovery of Uranus, among other things, and she was responsible for discovering 8 comets and a nebulae.
Could I request everybody mute, please, except our speaker?
Thank you. All right. Prior, the citizen scientist was known as a natural philosopher. There was a time in which philosophy and science were linked. And it was only years later that a separation of these two fields occurred. So people we now think of as scientists really at the time were considered natural philosophers in the language and philosophy and outlook of the time. So we have Galileo, we have Kepler with his planetary motion, Harvey in covering respiration, if I remember correctly, Boyle, Huygens, who worked on discovering the rings of, does somebody know how to pronounce that correctly? Huygens? Huygens, thank you. Wasn't sure. Who mapped out the rings of Saturn, among other things, and Robert Hooke, his work in microorganisms, and of course, Edmund Halley in his prediction of the recurring comet that now bears his name. So this is not a new thing. Looking at citizen science projects now, we know that when people become involved in citizen science projects, the participants gain a lot of educational benefit from being engaged in these projects. And there has been a problem, as many of us have noticed, to think scientifically and rationally, that there's been this split of science and society, and citizen science projects is one of those ways to bring these two worlds back together. There's a lot of work being done on understanding how important it is that people connect with nature for their own health and well-being. And so the hands-on experiences can put people out in nature for these studies. And it can build a sense of ownership about a local area through both the involvement of the program and involvement in place. I'm going to go back. One other thing I wanted to say, Just the downside of citizen science, I did some, I made a contact with the person who runs the Citizen Science Initiative at the Lab of Ornithology. And she sent me a wonderful reference that had to do with how good the data is coming from citizen science projects. And the data is good. There is good congruence that what the professional scientists are seeing and what the citizen scientists are seeing in their data gathering is contributing good data. So we're not getting, in most areas, garbage in, garbage out. Now, my own involvement in this began probably actually earlier than this, but really got going when I obtained this telescope. The telescope was created by a company in France called Unistellar. They came up with the design and launched it in a very successful Kickstarter program about 3 years ago. I own the EV Scope Equinox, which has, if you would look carefully, it has no eyepiece. Everything is transmitted by a dedicated app from the sensor. So it's a classic Newtonian telescope. The light comes in the entrance at the very top, which I'm pointing at now, at the orifice or opening, and goes down to a 4.5-inch reflector, and then bounces back up to a collector, where normally there would be a eyepiece up in this region. That's where the sensor is. Through the app, it does what's called autonomous field detection. It uses GPS, the time of a day local or time of night local, and does a search of the sky. You basically turn it on, set it loose on field detection, and it figures out exactly where is what in the sky, and will track on any given object throughout as long as that object is in the sky. And it creates a composite image that builds up over time through the accumulation of light, and has filters to reduce, electronic filters to reduce light pollution. So even in an area that's not really truly deep dark or dark sky, you still can get beautiful images. And the dedicated app has over 5,000 objects that I can point it at if they happen to be in the sky, and will tell me how long they've been in the sky. The most interesting thing as relates to our topic is it has a network tie-in for use by professional astronomers. And there's 3 areas where they're working, where citizen science is coming into play with this technologically advanced but amateur telescope. And that is planetary defense, the objects that could be disastrous to our life on Earth, the checking out of exoplanets, and tracking of asteroids. This is in combination with SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute. So the exoplanet program, what they do is that they have professional astronomers who are using sends out basically a bulletin to all users who have signed up for these projects. And they give you all the parameters to hook the telescope up so that it will track the particular object that they're looking for. So in this one particular event, in a Jupiter-like exoplanet was tracked back in mid-November in 2021, and they were able to hook up some 31 unistellar telescopes through the citizen astronomers and collect the observations that showed in this graph the dip in light coming from the star as the exoplanet crossed over the face of that star. So here we have professional scientists who are using these telescopes to expand their ability to monitor a given object. You know, let's face it, there's only so much time that astronomers can get on these telescopes, and they have to sign up months in advance. And there's bodies that basically say, hey, we'll give you time, or we think this is a higher priority item and yours is going to be put off for a while. So the fact that astronomers can link into these volunteer citizen astronomers, I think is pretty darn cool. Now let's get a little bit more down to earth with our own Cayuga Lake. I'm a member of the West Side Neighborhood Association, and they have a program in which they've been sampling coliform levels all along the west side of the lake. And there's approximately 15 of us samplers, and we take water samples at various places all along the lake, all along the west side of the lake, about 4 to 5 times per summer. I collect a little jar from the guy who organizes the program with a special package, a data sheet. I complete the data sheet with all sorts of information about the turbidity of the water, whether or not we had recent rains, any other special conditions, the temperature of the water, and where I collected it. So generally, I do it right off the end of my dock, and occasionally I'll go out in my kayak and collect it that way. And I'll even collect for my nearest neighbors if they happen to be away. All the samples are placed on ice and then sent to the Community Science Institute, who does the measurement of the levels of coliforms. The Community Science Institute, by the way, we are going to have a speaker from that institute after I get back from vacation in early July. So we have a guest speaker already lined up from this initiative. I have Peter Davies to thank for reminding me of Discover Cayuga Lake. This is an organization that organizes tours on the boat called the Teal that leaves from the marina, the Robert Treman Marina right near my house. And they are involved in the monitoring of temperature, turbidity, the plankton populations, toxic algae, and also looking for invasive water weeds, especially hydrilla. Peter, did you want to put anything in more on this? If you'd like to jump in, unmute, and join the conversation.
Oh, all I'd like to say is that at this time of year, for the next month, and in the fall, they take school kids out, and the school kids themselves take the measure of temperature and turbidity, and they do a plankton collection, and the school kids get to look under the microscopes and identify the plankton from pictures next to the microscopes. So I think that's pretty good. But one thing you might note is that Bob Chase became a major sponsor of this program. So I don't know if Bob wants to jump in. Last time I saw him, he was sort of below the radar. Let's have a look. Is Bob, are you still there? Don't know. But he and his wife participated quite a bit in this. Yeah, that's all I would say.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. Okay, so moving on here. Another place I've been involved in citizen science is the Tempest Weather Station. And this is a pretty cool device. This is a little bit more passive. This is another Kickstarter program, started about 5 years ago from a commercial organization that does weather predicting for various larger interests. And they got involved in a consumer weather station that actually extends their own data collection system. And what this device, I've got it up in the corner up here, sits on the end of a PVC pipe on the end of my dock. And then that little white sort of oblong device is a Wi-Fi repeater that takes the signal from the Tempest externally and pipes it into my Wi-Fi so that I can, at a glance, see what's going out at that station. So it measures solar radiation and UV index, air pressure, which for a barometric pressure. It's incredibly accurate rain sensor. Tells me exactly how fast the wind is blowing and from what direction. Gives me temperature and humidity. The lightning sensor I find really helpful as a sailor because it will basically tell me when was the last lightning strike and how far away was it. And it's solar powered. There's just a little solar cell oriented on the front there. You see the little black rectangle that collects enough light to keep this thing going and transmitting through Wi-Fi to the base station. And the neat thing is that this is tied into a larger network. So the Tempest people, they not only collect the information, but this data, they contribute it to NOAA's data collection for more accurate forecasts in our area. It gives me a hyper-local weather prediction. Now, again, this is fairly passive. I can look at it any time, but it is collecting data for a larger concern. It's an incredible device. I'm really happy the way it works, and the app is amazing. And I can share the URL of my weather station with anybody who I wish to, and they can tie into it and go, oh, the wind is blowing from the west at the miles per hour. Of course, local conditions, topography can affect it, but it gives a pretty good shot of what's going on down in this neck of the woods. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn the program over to David Grubb. He agreed to tell us a little bit about Foldit. So David, I'm going to let you take it over at this point. Do I need to stop sharing the screen, or do you want to just talk about it? David Grubb.
I have to unmute David.
If you can stop sharing, that would be helpful.
Okay, great. Screen is turned off. Over to you, my friend.
Okay. So Foldit is a citizen science project started in 2007, I think, to solve the protein folding problem, which is a problem of finding an energy minimum of a protein shape. So the problem is that from DNA or RNA, you get a protein described by a sequence of letters, a long list of letters. But that corresponds to some shape. And can you predict from that sequence of letters what the shape is going to be? So this shape shows all these curls, alpha helixes. You can predict that because it's local interactions. It's this one connecting with one nearby, connecting with one nearby. But the whole larger structure is more tricky because this one folds over and comes, and this protein element here, this letter here maybe, interacts with one on the next line because it's folded over in space to connect with itself. So the function of the protein typically depends on its shape. So you want to know what the shape is. So in 2008, protein folding problems were not solved, and you needed more computing power to try and work out what the energy minimum was. There's just too many possibilities to explore. So Foldit was started as citizen science to gamify, turn it into a video game to persuade people to try it out. And in 2010, it worked well, which is when I was looking at it myself. The status in 2020 is rather different. Computing power has gone up significantly, shall we say, in the last 10 years. And AI now solves this problem. And how do we know it solves a problem? Because we have a very unusual case. CASP, don't ask me what those initials stand for because I've already forgotten what they stand for. But what it is, it's a double-blind testing of the science, because you can solve the protein, find the protein shapes directly by looking at them. But that's a very time-intensive, expensive process. You just do it to a few. So what CASP does is they take about to be published papers of people who found exact shapes by X-ray or microscopy. And don't tell anybody, but give the protein out to the people who are trying to do it by computer power and say, solve that, and see if they solve it to give the same answer as the microscopy said. And it's double blind. Nobody knows what the answer is until it's all revealed at the end. And AI has solved it, all the problems given to it in this past year. So the successes in 2010 were that a structure was solved by protein folding game players, and they gave an answer that solved it to that double-blind testing was running at that time and solved it, but they didn't know how it worked, which is amusing because now they have artificial intelligence and nobody knows how that gets a solution either. It just gets a solution. Thank you very much. But they also found that the game players could discover methods of solving the situation. They asked the game players to give recipes and allowed recipes to be recorded and added to and modified. And again, sort of organically, a recipe evolved. It was an algorithm that was found to be very effective for solving the problem. So that worked. I have here a slide showing how stills from how the game works. This is a simple puzzle to show you how it works, to learn how to use it. These little red stars, they're not virus particles. They're just indicators of things that are too close together, causing a high energy, and they should be further apart. Orange ones are hydrophobic and should be on the inside. Blue lines are hydrophilic and should be on the outside. And so on the left is a very high energy structure that wouldn't exist. On the right is a low energy structure. The hydrophobics are close together. The hydrophilics are all pointing outwards and they don't bang into each other. All the red stars have gone away. So it's easy to see how it works on that scale, but when it gets 10 or 50 times bigger than that, then it becomes more of a problem to see how it works. So that's what they say. And this is the press release from 2020. Protein folding artificial intelligence has solved a 50-year-old grand challenge of biology, blah, blah, can predict the shape of proteins. But just don't think that this means that all protein structures have been solved. Some have not. Sometimes because people don't find them interesting enough. For example, beta keratin, the protein in feathers. As far as I know, nobody knows the shape of that yet. It's not going to solve any human disease, and it's a very difficult material to work with. And it's different in every species of bird. So who cares? So nobody knows what the protein structure is yet. I could try showing you the game in operation. Let me just try for an instant to show you the game in operation. Oops. That didn't work. Oh, is that it? Are you seeing my thing saying select a puzzle?
Yes.
Okay. So let's try a simple puzzle to make sure I can show you having the answer here. Hide the hydro. These are simple puzzles. You have to download a little program to run this thing. Loading. Okay, get 8,000 points to win. Orange side chains need to be buried. Okay. Bubbles showing this is bad. Blue chains need to be outwards. No thanks, I'm not interested in the science right now. And all we have to do is try and pull this thing around. and pull this thing out of the way. Oh, and then we won. Okay.
Yay!
Yay, we're a winner. Okay, so you get the idea. That's a very, very
Woohoo.
simple learning idea. So the, yes, I'll quit, thank you. So the idea of the citizen science moving science forward has kind of gone away because computing power has gone up so much we don't need it, but it's still very educational because it's doing it the way it really happens. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, David. Appreciate your contribution.
Can I ask a question on that? I think I understand and remember that there can be more than one configuration for a given sequence and have it be satisfactory. Does this gaming puzzle identify those things?
Well, yeah, you have an energy landscape of hills and dales, and there's a minimum point, but there may be more than one minima, and they could be quite far apart in configuration space, totally different shapes. And yes, and in principle, it will find, you can find either of them, and which is correct may depend on what the pH of the solution is that they're in, and so on.
Fascinating world.
Does that handle molecules that have metallic moieties within them as well?
Nowadays it can. I don't think originally it could, but it can. Yeah, but I'm not sure if it can deal with quaternary structures where you have more than one protein molecule coming together to form a superstructure. But you can obviously make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, you'll find it at Foldit, which is FOLD.IT. That's its URL if you want to explore.
Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. I just have a couple of the slides here. All right, here we are back on again. Okay, of course, on everybody's mind is climate change, and citizenscience.gov has been running a program for tracking climate change with citizen involvement. It is the study of phenology, the seasonal cycles in plant and animal communities. And they have a variety of programs that they're running. Again, using an app, you can participate in one of many projects having to do with the timing of when certain plants start coming into green, such as the onset of spring or the onset of fall, the identification of flowers for bats, identifying how many different insects are applying their activities over various nectar sources, looking for invasive species, both as insects and or as plants, and involvement with lilacs and dogwoods, because they are apparently an indicator species. Again, I want to thank Peter Davies for bringing this particular one to my attention. When I put out my bulletin of who was, if anybody wanted to be involved in making a contribution to this citizen science presentation, he came forward with a couple of good suggestions, and thank you, Peter. Okay. All right, we have our own Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Again, in our backyard, it's amazing we have such an organization. They're running several projects. One is where you watch a feeder for various species and be able to collect data even with cameras. Nest watch, what nests are out there and who's in them, and have those birds reappeared as the nest's been taken over by some other species. And then they have the great yearly backyard bird count. Living as we do on a long access road over state land, I could tell you that the various groups, birders do come through for that big watch once a year we have quite a few birders who are on our road, getting pretty close to the house, and we always, of course, welcome them. They're always so friendly, and they've got their binoculars and the cameras, and it's great to see. Okay, lastly, we've got a program run by the National Geophysical Data Center, and it is an app called CrowdMag, which is used for mapping the changes to the magnetic fields of the world. So you can walk around this app and graph out basically what the lines of Earth's magnetism is for data gathering for points that would be difficult for the scientists to cover in its entirety. And this is an interesting program that it's yet another way that we can participate in our understanding of the world. So if you wish to go further with this, one, just ask yourself, what is your area of interest? And there are so many ways of being engaged in citizen science projects. Again, as I said at the beginning, this was really going down the rabbit hole in terms of this talk could have gone on all afternoon for the number of projects that are out there in nearly every branch of science. Bear in mind that what we're offering as, quote, amateurs is a force multiplier for professionals, a term that is used in military sense. In this case, being able to extend their funding dollars and the tools that they have available through amplification by folks like you and I. In other words, particularly with changes to our climate, the need is great for participation in citizen science work. Okay, let me get out of here and go back and stop sharing. Okay, I'm done. And any questions before I pass this on?
Thank you very much, Mark. I want to remind everybody of the great Cape May bird count that was this past weekend, which involves teams of birders who from midnight to in 24 hours. Usually they start at the north end of New Jersey and end up at Cape May. And there's usually one or two from Ithaca. And there's also in the last few years, a group from Australia has come. And they count hundreds of species of birds. And there's also high school teams that participate. So.
Excellent.
Well, great. Thank you, Mark.
Yes.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you. For next week, we have Lee Murphy is going to be speaking about Cap Barton and scouting. So we have him for next week.